Carnage tonight in the Scotland village of Lockerbie, where a Pan Am 747 headed for New York crashed and exploded. No known survivors on the plane. They're still trying to determine the number of casualties on the ground.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Pan Am Flight 103 from London's Heathrow to New York's Kennedy Airport was at 31,000 feet tonight, a short time into its flight when air traffic controllers suddenly lost contact. A short time later, the 747 crashed into a Scottish village and exploded in a ball of flames. There were 258 people on board. 103 was the last Pan Am non-stop flight from London to New York tonight. And when it went down 300 miles northwest of Heathrow, there was no last-minute radio message from the cockpit. It's believed that all 258 people on the flight were killed, 243 passengers, including 3 infants and 15 crew members. There are reports tonight as well that 12 people on the ground were killed, but those are unconfirmed reports. NBC's Peter Kent is in London tonight. Robert Hager is in Washington looking into possible causes of this crash. We begin with Peter Kent and late details on this holiday tragedy. Peter?
Tom, in the village of Lockerbie, people were just finishing dinner, watching Christmas programs on television, preparing for the holidays when the jumbo came down. In a matter of seconds, the community was ripped by explosions and fires. An earthquake, some residents thought at first. Others believed a local factory had exploded. In one part of town, 7 homes disappeared in flames. A gas station exploded. A fireball rose hundreds of feet into the air. A large part of the Pan Am jet apparently crashed onto the main highway from England to Glasgow, which runs through the village of Lockerbie.
I believe the thing was on fire when it went across. There was definitely, it was trailing flames. There was a terrible explosion and the whole sky lit up and it was virtually raining fire. You know, it was just like liquid fire. The way it exploded, the way it went up was, it was just beyond description.
Eyewitness Archie Smith was a bit farther away.
It was just about 7 o'clock we heard this almighty bang and the whole skylight. I was looking out in the back kitchen which looks over onto the A74 and it was, the sky lit up and I heard this explosion. I realised it was a plane coming down, so we just get down on the floor.
Royal Air Force, Royal Navy and emergency services across southern Scotland and in Cumberland County just across the border in England have been scrambled. Regional hospitals have made hundreds of beds available. Britain's Civil Aviation Authority still maintains there is no evidence to support the 2 aircraft theory of a mid-air collision. Spokesmen say only that Pan Am Flight 103 disappeared from radar screens just before reports of the crash on the ground. One question which may only be answered when the aircraft's flight recorder is recovered is why, given all of this underpopulated part of Scotland, did the aircraft come down on top of Lockerbie? Was the Pan Am crew perhaps trying desperately to land on the highway? Tom?
Peter, there's also been a report in this country from aviation authorities in Washington that other pilots in the area saw the plane falling out of the sky already engulfed in flames. Have you picked up any of that there?
We haven't, Tom, although we have heard from several eyewitnesses on the ground that the aircraft was trailing flames as it passed over a village about 3 miles away from Lockerbie and as it was descending.
All right, thank you very much. Peter Kent in London tonight. One of those people who has seen all of the destruction on the ground and talked with a lot of eyewitnesses is Jack Mickley. He's with the Automobile Association of South Scotland. He's on the telephone tonight, and apparently we do not have that conversation. We had hoped to bring it to you at this time. If we can get Mr. Mickley up, we'll try to do that later in the program. NBC's Robert Hager covers aviation for us. He reports tonight that there are several theories on what may have happened to this 747 to cause it to crash shortly after takeoff. Bob's in Washington now with that report.
Tom, most accidents happen on takeoff or landing, and this one happened at 31,000 feet, near cruising altitude. That makes it very unusual. Further, sources close to investigators say there was no communication from pilots ahead of time. Whatever happened must have happened very suddenly. And there are reports that pilots in the area saw the plane in flames in the night sky as it was on its way down. That would indicate an explosion of some kind in flight. Here's what investigators will be looking at. Sabotage, similar to what happened to an Air India flight in June 1985. Sikh terrorists were believed responsible. A bomb, possibly in luggage, put aboard the plane leaving Canada, exploded over Ireland. The plane crashed into the ocean. The investigation was difficult because the wreckage was more than a mile underwater. The fuselage of this TWA airliner bombed over Greece in 1986 demonstrates what damage even a small bomb can do aboard a plane. Catastrophic failure of another sort aboard an airliner, similar to this 1985 crash of a Japan Airlines plane. The rear bulkhead burst from a faulty repair, blowing the tail off the plane. Cracks. In 1986, after cracks were found in a number of U.S. 747s, the Federal Aviation Administration instructed airlines to step up inspections, but the problems did not recur. The recent Aloha airline accident over Hawaii showed what cracks can do to a plane in flight. But the Aloha was an old Boeing 737, a plane that's had many more problems with cracks. Mid-air collision, similar to the disastrous 1986 Aeromexico crash outside Los Angeles. Investigators should be able to determine quickly whether there was any other plane in the area. But some other unknown plane at 31,000 feet would be highly unusual. If sabotage does turn out to be a leading possibility in this crash, that'll again raise questions about airport security. In government tests of security at U.S. airports, mock explosives get through undetected one time in every 10 tries. Tom?
Bob, isn't it also highly unusual for there to be no radio contact whatsoever?
Yes, extremely unusual, and investigators will be examining that very closely. But you know one thing, there's a lot of wreckage on the ground in this case. It's not under the ocean as it was in the Air India crash, and I think they'll find the flight data recorder. That'll tell them a lot. I think we'll get to the bottom of this.
All right, thanks very much, Robert Hager in Washington tonight. We now have on the telephone, I'm told, Jack Mickley, who is with the Automobile Association of South Scotland, and he has been to the crash site. Mr. Mickley, how many houses are on fire by your count? Can you give us a general description of the scene there?
Although it's difficult to be precise, but there was a number, at least half a dozen houses that were burning when I was at the scene earlier.
And the friends that you have in that area, how do they describe just what happened? Can you give us a detailed description of that?
Yes, one of my sergeants who lives in Lockerbie and was in his house at the time witnessed this. It was just, he described it as a plane that seemed to be very low and in trouble, and when he looked out it was burning and parts of wreckage falling off it scattered around it, then ploughed into the main dual carriageway between Scotland and England, the A74, and then landed and knocked down these houses in Lockerbie.
And we're also told that a number of cars that were on the highway where the plane crashed caught fire as well. Is that true?
That I don't know. We certainly arrived on the scene shortly after and said to the police that we would help them to clear the main dual carriageway, to leave them to get on with the rescue work in Lockerbie. And we cleared the cars and lorries from the carriageway to allow the emergency services to come from the north down to Lockerbie.
Thank you very much, Jack Mickley, who is the president of the Automobile Association of South Scotland. He was there tonight in Lockerbie shortly after the crash occurred. Among the passengers on Flight 103 were several students from Syracuse University, possibly as many as 37 who had just finished a semester of study in England. That tonight from Syracuse officials. Tonight's crash was one of the worst in history involving a U.S. jetliner. In 1977, a Pan Am plane collided with a KLM jet at the Tenerife airport in the Canary Islands, and 582 people were killed at that time. In 1979, an American Airlines plane crashed in Chicago, killing 275 people. And in 1985, an Aero air charter flight crashed in Gander, Newfoundland, killing 256 American military personnel headed home for the holidays.